Hello, everyone. It's Luke Renda here, and today I am with Fiona Aedgar. She is an astrologer. She's a teacher of astrologer. She's from Northern Ireland, and she is also a pagan. So we have a lot to talk about, a lot in common. And how are you doing today, Fiona?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Look, how are you?
I'm well, yes.
Good stuff.
It's a bit of a rainy day here in British Columbia, so we got a break from all the heat and
Yeah. Also raining here in Northern Ireland,
oh, nice.
as usual.
As usual, yeah. Did you get any
Yeah,
of the summer weather yet, or?
we do. I mean, it's very kind of erratic, the weather over here. So if it's raining, it can be only for like 10 minutes or so. Then it's like blazing sunshine.
Right,
It kind of reflects the mood of the place and
right.
the people.
Extremes.
Yes, very
Yes.
much so.
Yeah, it's here like that too. So today I thought we could just do a bit of your background and because you have a pretty interesting life story and path that you followed, and I think it would be for the first episode, it would help to kind of sketch out a bit of your background for people.
Sure. Well, I'm from Ireland, born and bred in Ireland, but I have Danish blood and Scottish blood. So I guess I've always kind of tapped into that in terms of especially my spiritual path. I have been studying astrology now for maybe 22 years, I think. 20, I'm 41 now, so about 22 years, maybe a bit more. And yeah, it's always been my kind of number one love in life. So became a professional astrologer in 2013. And now I'm a teacher of astrology, and I teach people how to read birth charts and become professional astrologers themselves.
Yes, and you're a very good teacher.
Thank you very much. And you're a
Been,
good student.
oh,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
I've been studying with Fiona for a few months now, so
Mm-hmm.
it's been helping me put everything together.
Yeah.
It's been quite
Yeah.
great. So how did you first even get into astrology?
It was my older sister. So I come from I guess a bit of a weird family. My my great grandparents, I believe, were spiritualists. So they always, like, that side of the family always went against the whole like Christianity thing. That's always been very strong within Ireland, unfortunately. So my oldest sister was into astrology, and she knew about the gods and all of that stuff. So she bought a book in a bookstore one day. I can't remember the name of the book. I can't remember. I wish I could, but it was about rising signs.
Hmm.
So I always knew that I was a Cancer, but then when I learned that my rising sign was Gemini, it started to fill in a bigger picture for me. Then I learned about my moon sign, moon in Scorpio. And I started to realize that astrology is so complex. It's been reduced to kind of like, I don't know, New Age types or whatever that kind of tend to go to astrology. But some of the greatest minds that ever existed, especially in the Greek times, they were astrologers. And it's a complex science that has been, well, for a reason, they don't want us to know it anymore, because you can look up someone's chart and automatically get everything about them. The stuff that they don't even realize about themselves, their shadow sides, their karma from past lives, what they excel at, what they're bad at, etc. So they don't want us to have those tools available. So that's why I encourage everyone to learn astrology, because it is a skill that you would use for every day for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's very helpful. And I know a lot of like therapists and psychologists will use it to help guide them through the therapeutic process as well, and help just because it can sort of reflect what people are going through, and they can kind of have a more of a concrete way of objective way of looking at things, right?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. It's very useful for that. Also, it can be used for getting well, banishing family curses,
Mm-hmm.
those repeating cycles of like bad luck or stuff that tends to happen and run in family lines. The answer, the solution for that is in your birth chart.
Yeah, you know, and one thing from going over charts with you, because when I first started in astrology, I, you know, I could look at certain aspects of stuff and kind of see how the relation was between the planets and this and that. But like even going through charts with you, every time you'd be like, "What do you think about this chart?" And at first, it's like, "Oh, I don't know." But as what I really learned from working with you was how to like dialogue with the chart. You know, it's like you are starting a conversation with it, and then you just pick out one part, and then the next thing you know, you're figuring out the entire chart. And it's quite amazing how there's just like that relationship with a chart. You know, you're dialoguing with it, and more is being revealed as you go into it. It's just so amazing.
Yeah, it's deep. I mean, studying astrology for 22 years, I sometimes still learn things about my own birth chart.
Yeah, totally.
It's that deep. Of course, you have the Western birth chart, which focuses on the planets and the angles, but then you also have the fixed stars that we can use within Western astrology also. And that's just like never ending. So there's always something to study, always something to learn and think about, especially about yourself. In terms of wounds, it can the birth chart can show a lot of unresolved traumas. You know, like for example, I grew up during the Troubles here in Northern Ireland. My dad was in the military, so we were kind of targeted by the terrorists. And well, life back then was nuts. You know, my mom was checking under our car before she took us on the school run for car bombs. And if you'd asked me before I started studying astrology, you know, did that affect you? I'd be like, yeah, of course it did at the time, but I'm totally fine. You know, I'm fine. But then as I started to learn more about astrology, it was my Chiron in the 12th house. So the 12th house is about hidden enemies, also unresolved trauma. And with Chiron in there, of course, I had a lot to work through.
Yeah,
But
that's something we have in common as Chiron in the 12th.
that's right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, many different layers of traumas and wounds. But of course, I always say that the 12th house is where the gods speak to us, because it's like a bridge between your own physical world and then the world of the gods or the spirit world. So if you have a 12th house planet or even a transit, it bridges that gap and you start to be able to tap into those other realms. So the like medieval astrologers, they saw the 12th house as doom and isolation and imprisonment and hospitals. But of course, in the 1600s, they didn't have a very complex spiritual life because of Christianity. So now it is a better place to be because we have more tools to work with that.
Yeah, and a lot of it had to sort of be encoded through like Christian Hermeticism or whatever, right? Which was just like kind of a cover to put all this occult information in and out to the public, tarot and all that stuff as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've lost a lot of our knowledge, especially in terms of Western astrology, because of that, because of, you know, Christianity. But the Vedic astrologers, their system has been unbroken for thousands of years. So although I am a Western astrologer, I use the tropical system. I do work with a lot of Vedic practices, as I believe that our system once contained those practices, but that knowledge has kind of been lost.
Yeah, and like there's a bit of like Hellenistic astrology left over, and it's kind of like we've had all these leftovers that we've had to sort of piece back together to come up with a new whole again, right?
Yeah. Well, I have come up with my own system for the Western birth chart, and it focuses on ancestry.
Right.
So ancestral wounds or gifts, how to heal those, the stuff that you've inherited in your blood, because for an example, the 12th house is your blood memory. So there's not a lot of astrologers that will speak about that. But of course, the blood is where you get your karma from. Who are you? Are you just this individual thing in the universe? Not really. You're a composite of all of your ancestors. So all of their traumas, all of their karma, all of their gifts, you have all of that in your own body. So people don't know how to, like, if we just work with psychology, it can be helpful, of course, but it's not really a complete system of healing, because it has this mostly got the spirituality sucked out of it.
Yeah, psyche doesn't mean spirit anymore.
No,
it means the brain or something else, right? That's one thing I really appreciate about Jung's work is he brought up the fact that, like, yes, your ancestry and your cultural symbolism is very important. If you don't know about your ancient cultural symbolism, then you won't be able to understand your dreams or things happening in your life, right? Whereas, again, in the West, we've adopted all of these other Eastern philosophies and things like that that really weren't serving us, you know. And Jung brings that up a lot. He's like, it would have been better, rather than to adopt, you know, the ways of the East, to just acknowledge our symbolic poverty, I think is the way he put it, and then start to, you know, sort of like resurrect stuff that we had lost.
Exactly. But of course, there are people out there now that don't want us to use anything like that, because they say it's like, if you're a white European, it's racist.
Yeah.
To use your native symbols and work with Odin and your native gods. But of course, that's another trap. So we can't let them win. I continue to use my symbols. You know, I've got my Valknut here on my, it's the 9 worlds. It's not a symbol of supremacy. You know, that's where I'm going when I die. So we have to rebel against this as much as possible, reject this awful thing that they've cursed us with. So
well, it's your native European roots.
Yeah.
Right? That's what people don't get, is that everyone's indigenous to somewhere.
Of course.
Right. So
yeah. It's really important to get in touch with your roots. You know, whether you are African or European, whatever. I wish that everyone would reject Abrahamism and go back to their ancient forms of spirituality, because it's really messed up the idea of what a god is. You know, this Yahweh, whatever it is, you know, they claim that it's everyone's god. And we're all mixed up in this jumble, and you know, he accepts all of us, but the gods were always seen as our blood ancestors. They're like the gods are like the collective soul of the tribe. So of course, if you reject all of those gods, let's say the gods died out, then that would mean the end of the people.
Yeah, well, and you know, like different religions or spiritual practices, you know, they'll have their own type of mercurial figure, you know, like we have Odin, they have something else. It's similar, but it's not the same. This is one thing I have to like go on about with people a lot, whereas they say, oh, you know, like Odin is Hermes, or Odin is this person. It's like, well, you know, they're mercurial figures, but they're not the same. I don't remember a time when Hermes plucked out his eye to drink from the well of knowledge, you know, like, so there's this different story and this different lineage that goes along with these different paths, and it's going to be meaningful for you if that is part of your ancestry.
Yeah, exactly. Right? They have a lot of regional differences. So there is a lot of evidence that would suggest that originally there was this group of gods that was Indo-European, but then the people migrated, and so the gods took on different stories, different forms, you know, regional differences. But what works the best for you is the god that is closest to your ancestry. And again, this is something that will say, oh, Odin's the All-Father. It's like, yeah, he's the All-Father for those people. And this is not to do with racism or excluding anyone. It means that if you try and work with the God that you have no blood connection to, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, it's not going to have as much of an impact on you as, say, like symbolism that's been in your bloodline for thousands of years.
Yeah, archetypes.
You know, like if I took a Native American symbol, like I live 2 minutes away from a native reserve here. And if I had a Native American symbol, it's not going to mean as much to me as it is to my Native neighbors. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and vice versa. If they took a Northern European symbol, it's not going to mean as much to them as their ancient symbolism. That's obvious, right?
Yeah.
People, but it's in it, you know, because they, the Native community, like they have their own practices, and they have a public practice which you can see, and then they have their own private stuff that they do where you are
Yeah.
excluded from, right? Like if you're not part of their tribe, they're going to exclude you because it's their own private personal affair.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong about with that.
Nope.
It's only when others do it that it becomes racist and whatever.
Yeah, people like me. If
Yeah.
I do that, then I'm racist.
Yeah.
But like, no, it's silly. It is silly because it's, you know, you're disempowering yourself. And that's one of the reasons why Christianity has been such a blight on the European people, because it never was our God. It's a desert God.
Mm-hmm.
So when people beg and pray to this thing, you know, in the sky, and it doesn't do anything. When I ask Odin for something, and I only ask for very important things that mean a lot, you know, not money or anything, I get it. I get an answer. I always hear when people start to work with Odin, they get an immediate omen or a sign in nature, you know, ravens, of course, or something similar. He hears us because he's in our blood. But Christians don't seem to get anything except become extremely vulnerable to any form of spiritual attack. They always are having issues with entities. You know, it's the same with atheists and all kinds of horrible stuff going on because they have no protection. There are a lot of hostile beings in the universe. But when you have your own native God on your side, those beings can't get to you.
Yeah, and it's kind of like with the, you know, like the absolving of your sins and all this type of stuff, like it's become like a strange neurosis in a way where, you know, like the Catholics go every week to confess and then just go back to doing the same things that they were confessing about. You know what I mean? It's a very strange religion, you know. There's been a few people, Slick Dissident on YouTube and a few others that have sort of shown Yahweh to be this like raging volcano god, but like to be like the Vulcan, like the god of like smiths. It's a very, very interesting, this whole cryptic system that we've been given. And yes, again, blanketing everyone with the same, painting everyone with the same brush, you know, like it's not healthy for anyone, you know. And yeah, like the native peoples here, you know, you go into one of their houses, there's a big picture of Jesus on the wall.
Oh no.
You know, and we're wondering why everyone's so screwed up.
That's very upsetting to hear. But of course, it's the same over here.
Yeah.
In Ireland, Catholicism is like their heroin. So you go in and there's, you know, Jesus and the Virgin Mary, and especially in Ireland in particular, they've like completely rejected their native gods. And Ireland is pretty screwed up now, you know. During all of that COVID nonsense, they kind of lined up like sheep. But if you go to the Scandinavian countries, especially Denmark, you know, where I've spent a lot of time because my ancestors came from Denmark and my partner is Danish, they all seem to be heathen. And if they're not practicing, you just have to go underneath the surface a little bit and they're heathens. And they don't let anyone control them. Cool. So, but I personally believe that the Christian God or demon is a demon. It's an evil entity because it's caused so much destruction. It's caused man to feel like he is not a part of nature anymore. Look what they do to animals.
animal sacrifices and all that stuff is what it was based on.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's like he's like this Yaldabaoth, right? This Gnostic demiurge.
Yeah.
It's totally wild. You know, one thing, you know, because I have some of my family, like my grandfather was from Ireland, but my other grandparents were from Italy, and like the Mediterranean, like the Christian symbolism, you know, was just infused with paganism, but it just
Mm-hmm.
came under this guise. So it's like if you can break down that symbolism, there's still some remnants left.
Yeah.
Whereas with other people from other religions and other countries, say like for example the natives here, that Christian symbolism doesn't have anything in there of their own native spirituality, right? So it's
Yeah.
especially detrimental.
Yeah. Well, it was a way just to make us all slaves,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't it? Bow and submission, grovel to this like being in the sky. But there's also a real energy of narcissism within Christianity, I think. You know, it's like, oh, God wants this for me. God will do this, God will do that. It's like, if it's a God, you know, it doesn't care about these trivial things.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, if you read the Havamal compared to the Bible, it's like, you know, you have to forge your own path.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be strong and live your life with integrity and honor and dignity. So there, if you say a prayer and you've done something bad, it's not going to go away. It's going to stay in your blood. Then your descendants are going to suffer from it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't like it. In case that isn't that hasn't been
That
clear
isn't
so far.
obvious. Yeah,
You know,
totally.
I come from a Christian family. My parents are Christians. I'm the only heathen. But it, you know, it can be a lonely path, especially when you're surrounded by atheists and Christians and people that are disapproving. But you have to do what is right for you and the right thing.
So did you go through a period of atheism yourself
No.
or no?
Honestly, I was born pagan, although I didn't necessarily know that it was that. I used to go to church because my parents made me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel anger within me as a very young child. I kind of had a lot of disdain for this person called Jesus, who we were supposed to kind of grovel. I guess it was the Viking blood, you know, it was a blood memory. And I was furious. And I just knew that it wasn't right. So I did think a lot about it. What is it? I didn't believe in their afterlife. It didn't make any sense that you either go to this place or that place. And but over the years I learned that it was paganism that I believed in. I did dabble in a lot of different stuff. You know, the New Age is just as bad as Abrahamism, very dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
completely separates you, just as Christianity does, from your blood and your ancestral practices. It was fun. I had a lot of fun and a lot of, you know, I went from one thing to the other. Then I kind of got onto the Egyptian gods and felt a very strong connection with those. Of course, those are also your Indo-European gods.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Sekhmet in particular spoke to me. I started to see her in dreams. And then I learned who she was. And I still have a statue of Sekhmet in my kitchen. But when I discovered Ausatru and my native gods, then it changed everything for me. It kind of realigned me. I had a lot of attacks over the years, spiritual attacks that completely ceased. My astrology business really took off. All of the wounds that I'd been carrying from the troubles and that, even though I saw a therapist for like a year, didn't really do anything other than it helps to talk about it, but it didn't heal the real issue because it was some kind of karmic thing within my blood. But when you start to do rituals with the gods, especially on the equinoxes and solstices, you're aligned with the circle of the year. Things die in the winter, you know, stuff that you're carrying that needs to be released. If you do a ritual on the winter solstice, you will drop that baggage. And then if you do a ritual on the spring equinox, you start to create this new growth and positive change within your life. It wasn't just, our ancestors didn't just do these rituals for fun or through superstition, or they did it for a reason. So
like setting that intention too, right? Setting that
yeah.
intention and then acting upon it. That's the one thing, like with the praying to God or whatever. I love Lau and Walter Russell's work. She wrote a book called God Will Work With You, but Not For You. Right. And that's like where it all kind of comes from that. It's like you're just asking, hey, like, do this for me so I don't have to do anything. Right. It becomes almost like the God becomes your scapegoat for a lot of this with, Abrahamism and everything like that. So
yeah.
it's more about, oh my, here. I'll just
It's
mute myself.
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's all of this. So I'm sinful, and I'm doing these things. I have no control over it. But also, when you're just praying, you're asking for energy without giving anything in return. There was always sacrifice. I'm not talking about animal or human sacrifice. That came in much later, and it was part of the Kali Yuga. But you must sacrifice something to get something in return. It goes against spiritual law. That's why communism is so absurd and unnatural. But you must sacrifice something, whether it's a bad part of your personality or something that you don't like about yourself. You can sacrifice that in return for something else, or you can pour mead and offer incense, as I do. But there must be a give and a take in terms of your rituals.
That's a gift for a gift.
A gift for a gift, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just like the whole way it's broken down. I did this whole course on Walter Russell science and stuff like that. And I was also reading like the book that Steve McNallen wrote on Asatru. And it was really interesting, the correlations between like the gods that he was describing and then the way that Walter Russell like broke down his science. He's like, here's this all. And then you have this all father and all mother. And it was really interesting. And then they reproduce in sexed pairs of opposites. And as I'm reading about all these gods and their wives, it was so fascinating.
Yeah.
And this guy is like a scientist, right? And he's not talking about paganism or anything, but I could see these connections to our physical reality. It was quite wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And Stephen McNallen is a fantastic guy. And that book is one that I recommend for everyone. Of course, if you Google his name, you'll come up with, oh, he's a white supremacist, he's a Nazi.
Right.
No, he's just practicing our spirituality in an authentic way. It hasn't been contaminated by the New Age.
No. And meanwhile, he's in Burma fighting for the natives there, for their land, or he's in Africa fighting against elephant poachers with the Africans.
Yeah.
That's what racist people do.
Yeah, of
they
course.
help indigenous people of other cultures as well, right? That's the
yeah.
guy's fighting, bleeding beside the Africans to stop the poaching, and he's being called a racist by everyone else. It's absolutely ridiculous. But
of course, yeah, and of course the AFA, the organization that he founded, they do like food drives all the time for anyone. It doesn't matter what color you are, where you're from. If you're in need, then you go and they give it to you. But no, he's a solid guy. But we do live in the age of darkness. Whatever the common belief is, then it's the opposite. The opposite is true. That's what I found with literally everything now, including your health and anything else.
Yeah, well, with like even the internet censorship, 10, 15 years ago, if you looked up, hey, herbal remedy for like whatever, athlete's foot or anything like that, you would get a whole bunch of different links to different doctors, different herbalists. Now you look up herbal remedy for this, you'll get 10 links that all say herbs are bad, take our medicine, right?
Exactly.
Totally wild.
Yeah, especially stuff like homeopathy, which is really effective because aside from your ancestral path, it is like the only thing that can penetrate all of those layers. Your ancestral karma and baggage, your physical body, your spirituality. A homeopathic remedy will work in all of those. And it was a German medicine, and it's been used for a couple of 100 years. But of course, now it's a pseudoscience. First, they said it was a pseudoscience and ineffective, and now they say it's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Which is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Herbs are more dangerous than Oxycontin or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, German new
Exactly.
medicine is taking off, but just no one's talking about it. Like it's made quite the advancements in the last like 50 years. It's like nowhere to be seen in the mainstream, which is unfortunate.
No. And of course, if it's German, they're automatically going to call it racist.
Right.
So
Yeah.
medicine is racist.
Yeah. Everything is now.
Everything is, yeah. Well,
except for actual racism, but
I know. Well, you've got to the point now where people are just sick and tired of it. And a lot of African people are tired of it also, because they're setting us at each other. So they're bringing all of these. It used to be that when you were like banished from your homeland, it was the worst thing that could ever happen when you were in exile, because they believed there was almost like an umbilical cord that you were attached to when you were on your native land. So the worst thing was to be banished. But of course, now with all of these Zionist wars, and they bomb the shit out of the Middle East, and those poor people are just ripped away from their homelands. And it's like, okay, you come and move here, but they don't thrive in the same way that they would in their homeland. So they're ripped away from all of their ancestral stuff. And it's all because of money. And then they set us at each other. They're trying to cause race wars deliberately.
Well, you look at Eastern Europe, and after World War II and World War I, carving up all these new countries and putting ancient enemies side by side. And it's like all these conflicts we see in Eastern Europe are all from this, right?
Yeah.
So it's quite wild.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. It really is. But it is the nature of the Age of Darkness and the Kali Yuga, which we are kind of coming out of now, but it's going to be at least 200 years before we see like real improvements. Sorry, but that's don't blame the messenger. That's just the way it is. So if you read the ancient texts, this is no surprise. Everything that's going on in the complete like fucked up world that we live in, the good thing is that it will end. It will end. Some part of you is going to be here to experience the golden age, but I can't hurry it up. There's nothing that any of us can do, because right now humanity is in its winter time. Everything is dark. There's no light from the sun or the gods. I mean, literally the sun. Every day I go outside, blazing sunshine until 9 a.m., 10 a.m. Then the chemtrails start. Everything is gray, humid. There's no sunshine. It's like, that didn't used to happen when I was growing up, in the 80s and 90s. This is a new thing.
Well, a lot of people say that like the sun is this transmission, right, from the other world, right? It's like its light is shining literally like information down onto you, and by blocking it out is like sort of like it's suppressing all that. It's suppressing that exchange that we would have, right?
Yeah,
it's the same thing here. I mean, the other day it's been sunny for a week, and then there's 25 jets flying over my house, even though we have an airport that only has over in the next town over on the next island. It only has a flight like every 2-3 hours, maybe 10 flights a day. I got 10 planes flying over my house back and forth.
Yes.
And you know what? Today it's raining. So
I know. Yeah. But of course, you point that out to the average normie, and they're just like, oh, get the tinfoil hat on.
Yeah.
But two places that really stood out for me. One was Cyprus. When I traveled to Cyprus, didn't see a chemtrail the entire time that I was there. Now, maybe that's changed now, but that was only a couple of years ago. And the people were so happy,
Mm-hmm.
genuinely happy, genuinely friendly. Of course, Aphrodite was still very much alive and well. So maybe that had something to do with it because her temple was still there. People talk about Aphrodite, stuff connected to her is, in the shops. But excuse me, yeah, no chemtrails. Everyone was happy. Denmark also does not have a lot of chemtrails. And I've probably spent in total months over there. And yeah, there seems to be a connection. They hit Ireland the hardest, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm surprised
It's,
here that there's so many. I'm like literally in the middle of like almost nowhere. But
yeah,
because it's like the wind will go down towards like what they call a lower mainland and near where like the city of Vancouver is. So it'll spray here and then it'll go all the way down there. And if they just leave well enough alone, it would be, we would have sun, we'd have rain, we'd have the perfect mix. But they
I
keep
know.
manipulating
Yeah,
for the extremes, like it was really hot and they sprayed and it's raining now. Like, we need rain so that we don't have forest fires. But you look at where is this rain coming from? It's droughting out other areas in the United States and places like that, right? So
yeah,
they just leave well enough alone, the buggers, eh?
yeah. They won't.
No.
They're going to continue until it goes way too far, and then ultimately it's going to end the Kali Yuga and go into the golden age, which is very much going to be back to a kind of tribal existence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where people are happiest, when they're living within small tribes.
Well, and this whole lockdown thing has kind of forced that to happen. We've started having our own little communities, our own little groups, like-minded people getting together. And yeah, that's just what's going to happen, right? We're going to start these smaller groups, like-minded people. There's not going to be this global community thing that we had before, or this
Yeah.
idea of it, right? It wasn't really working out, but
Yeah. Well, of course, it coincides with the age of Aquarius, right? Which we're in. So if you think about the sign of Aquarius, yes, it's connected to tribes, but it's also connected to really like fucked up technologies and weird shit.
mm-hmm.
So right now we're in that weird shit phase with like small tribes starting to form. So the age of Aquarius has only really just started, and we have to get through this sort of like messed up part before we get to the better stuff.
Yeah, well, and it's that transition phase, like where like the ages are overlapping. One age is dying, and then that's
Yeah.
fertilizing the next age. But it's obviously in any transition phase or in any birth, there's always struggle, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But we'll just get there. I think knowing this, it makes it a lot easier to deal with. But it kind of irritates me when I see a lot of people giving false hope. I mean, I don't follow any other astrologers, but I've heard people say that certain astrologers have said that in a couple of years, everything is going to be better again. It's like, are you fucking serious?
Mm-hmm.
Do you really think that everything is just going to go into some kind of utopia? Have you seen what they're doing? And the power that they have over all of us now, they're not going to let that go anytime soon. So you just got to be happy. I mean, you and I were talking about this before we kind of went on air. I have been happy. The last time I said that, a lot of people really didn't like it.
Yeah.
As if, how dare you be happy when everything is going on? It's like, look, I'm used to the apocalypse. I was growing up in Northern Ireland in the 80s and 90s. But even with that, you can't let the bastards win. They want you to be unhappy. They want you to feel hopeless. Oh, let's go and take a bunch of pharmaceuticals and, or commit suicide. No, you stay and you be happy and you do the things that are going to make you happy, such as your family and nature.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is false.
Well, and what's nice, as we were talking about, is like when you're living in this Ragnarok Kali Yuga, but you're the only person who notices.
Yeah.
Now other people are noticing. It's like, hey, thank you. So it's we kind of have a few more people in our group that are kind of getting it, right? Because before,
Yeah.
I was the guy 15 years ago in front of the community center when they're handing out the H1N1 shots, I'm like, don't give this shit to your kids. Don't take this stuff. Here's information from doctors, that was me 15 years ago. So when this started happening, I was like, oh man, I've already been down this road. Right.
Yeah.
And so and other people are coming up to me. Did you know this? Did you know that? It's like, you remember me telling you this stuff like 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Come on, guys.
I know.
So it's kind of nice to have other people being motivated to sort of step out of their box and share some truth and just like contend with this government and contend with these fascist people, right? Like,
yeah,
it's time to wake up, people.
It is, and most of them won't.
Yeah. Around here, we have a saying, get your head out of your ass.
Yeah.
So it's like, you probably have that in Ireland too.
Yeah.
Time to get your head out of your ass, folks.
Yeah, we say arse over here. So
Nice. That's good.
But yeah, you are right. I mean, a lot of people have kind of woken up to this, I guess, but I think the majority never will. No. The thing is that the people that have been awake throughout history, it's never really been the majority. It's only been a couple. So we're going to get to the point where awake people are probably going to be hunted down in the street eventually, because the kind of NPC, the sort of robotic, like pro-vaccine, believe everything what they're seeing and hearing on the media, begging to be controlled. I personally think that a lot of them are possessed by artificial intelligence, because they don't seem human.
There is something weird about those people. I've been working on this project trying to figure out like what is going on with those people? Like, are they just like newer people? You know what I mean? Like, are they newer souls? Are they like almost like clone like what's going on with these people? Like the orphan trains in America and like these, like the World's Fairs. Have you looked into any of that stuff?
Yeah.
The World's Fairs, and like they're saying, oh, these people built these buildings, yet they're these dumbass people standing in mud who can hardly keep their streets clear. And you're trying to tell me they built a 15-story building of Roman pillars and
exactly.
And like they look like so out of place that they don't even know what they're looking at. And it's like, what's going on with these people? Are they like some Westworld type? They were just sort of let out of their theme park into this new larger world, and they're, are they young souls? I don't really know. I've been trying to work on this project for a while and trying to find a way to articulate it.
Yeah, with the new soul, old soul thing, I personally don't believe in, because the ancients believed that all of our souls there's like 3 parts to your soul, right? So one part is ancestral. You cannot exist without your ancestors, right? So you have to have a body genetically similar to your own to reincarnate into. Now, that was always the belief. So of course there's this big push now for people not to have kids.
Yeah.
Right? Now, people don't want to have kids because they're inconvenience or whatever. If you're able to, you should have kids. So there's a huge reason, because you don't want your own tribal soul to die out. Now, that's the reality of it. People won't like that, because we have this new age concept of the soul where we can, this time I'm going to decide to be a Native American. It's like, no, it's tied to your blood. That is why your blood is so important. That's why certain people choose not to have blood transfusions, because you're taking on that other person's ancestors into your own body.
Yeah, organ transplants, crazy stuff happen with people with organ transplants, eh?
Yep. So there's a lot to the blood, but Tartaria and all of that stuff I have looked into. Okay. Now, if you look at the COVID stuff and how they have lied about it so easily, I pretty much think they have lied about nearly everything in history. Everything. So if you can't see the truth about today, you won't see the truth about history. It's important that you do know. With all of these big historical events, especially in the last couple of 100 years, it's really important that you go and do some research into those, because this is a direct consequence of that. But yeah, even the Grand Canyon looks like a melted city.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
Like here in Canada, like in eastern, like where I used to live in Ontario on the eastern side, like there's cathedrals and stuff there's no way the people living there built these cathedrals. There's no way. These people were literally still fighting with the Hurons and the Mohawks, and yet they have these 10-story buildings, these huge cathedrals, all this stuff along these rivers in Quebec. And it's like, there's no way that a bunch of like Pilgrim Fathers and French settlers built this when the whole place was supposed to be forested and infested with all types of different tribes and people that are fighting each other. It's like, when did you have time to build a gigantic castle?
Yeah.
You know, it's so wild. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't believe in the young soul thing either. I think it's all trauma. I think it's the
Yeah.
trauma is wiping this slate clean, and then the re-traumatization of the people is just like keeps blanking that slate out, because when you're traumatized, you're not thinking about anything but the moment that you're in. So past and future aren't there. You're just in this fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened to those people. They were severely traumatized and then just dropped off in this new world and say, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, if you look at the fact that the gods are your original ancestors, so each one of us has a soul that is connected to the gods. It's like a chip from the god spirit. If when humanity started to worship a god that was basically an alien life form, an alien demon, so those people have taken on fragments of that life form within their souls. And of course, that would make you like that. This robot that is easy to control, has no sense of spirituality or natural instincts left. Well, then it begins to kind of make sense.
It's totally wild, eh?
Yeah, it's
Stuff.
wild.
I'm glad you looked into that Tartarian stuff, because it's like, I don't really call it that, but it's like, yeah, there's definitely layers of civilization that have happened, and there have been these resets. And recently, like since the 1800s, there have been multiple resets happening. You know, like the Civil War, World War I, World War II, like those things were major resets. And it's to cover up all this stuff that's right there. Like, it's not as far away as we think, this ancient history. It's like, you know, a couple hundred years old, whereas there was people living here that were completely had different knowledge than we have today. And it wasn't, you know, like there was thousands of years ago with the pyramids and all that stuff. Who knows how old those buildings are? But some of these buildings that people are literally living in now were built by people who were not really, had a different consciousness than we do now, right?
Yes. Yeah. When I was a kid, I had a blood memory, I guess, and I just knew that there was this cycle. I guess it was the cycle of the yugas. And there, like you say, there's a reset. Everything is wiped, and then we kind of start again. But then I started to realize, as I grew more knowledgeable and studied, that humanity has become very advanced many times. If you look at the story of Atlantis and Hyperborea, this has happened a lot. I don't believe in the theory of evolution whatsoever. I think it's a load of nonsense designed just to make us seem so insignificant and stupid, really. But yeah, I believe that this cycle has happened over and over again. And if you look at some of the ancient Vedic stories, they're clearly describing a nuclear war.
Yeah, airships.
Yeah.
On Crow the other day, they were talking about airships, and even in 1930s Germany, they had video phones.
Yeah.
And then they did that whole thing with the airships. What was that? The Zeppelin. Remember that? What was that one? The Hindenburg. Oh, these people didn't know that smoking on it would blow up this gas that they knew was explosive, right? So it's like airships, dangerous. But I think before, that's how people traveled a lot.
Yes.
Was these airships, especially in like the dawn of this age of Aquarius, right? A lot of like people went from water ships to literally airships. And then there's like been a whole bunch of cover-ups. And I think there is like normal natural resets that happen. And then there's these artificial ones that these people have sort of like taken advantage of. And they've created these artificial resets to stay in power, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is that there weren't really any UFO sightings until after the Second World War.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that, especially in England and places like that, that saw UFOs with kind of Germanic aliens
Right.
on them. But then, of course, they were like, oh, no, we better like do something to distract these people so that they don't hear the truth. So they started all of these movies about little green men and, you know, all kinds of like grotesque aliens and reptilians. But lots of people have have had experiences with these kind of Nordic aliens, as they call them.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know shit. We don't know that.
Coming out of the waters, right?
Yes.
Stuff like that. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I wish we could have more of this knowledge because it's so interesting and it's not that old. Like, that's the crazy thing. We're trying to figure out stuff from thousands of years ago. We don't even know what happened 50, 60, 70 years ago.
I know.
That's wild.
Yeah. Also, all of the stories about giants.
Yeah.
Here in like the giants are in all the mythology, and there's actually a lot of evidence that giants did exist. I believe that they built the megaliths. It's like, oh, how did they do that? Drag all of those huge stones and build pyramids. Well, pyramids are all over the world, even in China.
Yeah.
And if you look at, I think even the Faroe Islands, it's like a mountain. It's clearly a pyramid that's been covered up. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Well, here in Canada, we have huge megalithic destruction here. There's megalithic blocks, clearly megalithic blocks with those little holes in them.
Yeah.
In Saskatchewan, there's pyramids here, and they're just completely overgrown. But yeah, the like megalithics in Canada, I thought we were under 40 miles of ice or whatever.
Yeah.
Over here, right? So who's building these buildings? What is up with all these lies? It's so crazy, right? Like, it's like, well, how would there be megaliths here if we're under 4 miles of ice or whatever?
Yes. You know? Well, that brings us back to paganism, because when you get onto your authentic ancestral path, you open up all of the ancestral knowledge and wisdom that is in your blood, and you get answers to these things that come to you, gnosis. And quite often I have thought about and wondered and pondered about things, and then I've kind of got the answer through that. So it opens up all of your that's the true DNA awakening. It doesn't come from Pleiadians and space cats and all of this stuff. It's your own blood.
And also like contemplation, like giving yourself that time. Like, I remember as a young kid and a teenager, I spent so much time just like sitting and thinking and like working ideas out in your head. Oh, you know, you can hold this idea in your head without absolutely believing everything about it. You're kind of doing this intellectual exercise, and by giving yourself that freedom to do that, you will have almost like, it's not even like a download, it's like you're uploading it from your own bloodline, your ancestral Akashic record or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to give yourself that space to actually just think freely.
Yes.
Right. It's like this free thinking, just the same with all the stuff's going on now. If you just stop, and the only way you can believe the story that's going on now is if you don't think about it. If you don't think about it, you'll believe it. But as soon as you think about any part of it, you'll be like, everything they're saying is bullshit.
Yeah.
So it's
I
like
know.
not thinking. And then again, we go to like what we're just talking about, ancient civilizations, your ancestors, whatever. Just give yourself the time and space to think about it and to contemplate. That's, you know, everyone's distracted with their phones or with whatever.
I know. Right? It's very sad. Yeah. Especially little children.
Yeah.
Because they're growing up. I mean, like when you and I were young, there weren't cell phones and stuff. So we kind of had a relatively normal life until all of that stuff, you know, came into existence. But little children now are just, they have no break from any of that anywhere they go. And I think that is really the sad thing. But I guess that's why so many people are choosing to do homeschooling or doing whatever they can to prevent them from being polluted from the kind of demonic schooling system that is in place now.
Yeah, well, kids like this with their play, like kids exorcise things out during their playtime, right? And if they don't have that playtime, and so that they're just sitting in front of a TV spacing out, they're almost like they're getting like uploading like artificial complexes into themselves rather than like dealing with the ones they already have, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm really fortunate that like my kid can only watch TV for like 20 minutes or half an hour, and then he's like, I got a headache. It's like nice, because he's just not used to it, right? He's not conditioned to be in front of a screen all the time. So,
Yeah.
you know, like he'll
Yeah.
want to watch like one of his shows about nature or like building or whatever. And, you know, it's like after a little
Uh,
while, I'm like, buddy, you know, you can't watch anymore. And he'll be like, yeah, I gotta stop because I'll get a headache. And I'm like,
uh,
yes. But it's
very
just that, you know,
sweet.
he'd rather read books or play Lego or out in the sandbox or whatever. And it's just because that's the environment he's grown up in, you know. So
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. It was the same for me too. I kind of look back on my childhood with fondness, even though we had all that stuff with the, the troubles and like being under death threat. My family were kind of under death threat by certain organizations, but I still had a really good childhood because I had a horse, we had land, countryside, animals, and yeah,
And
I think,
nature to play in, right?
yeah, and a weird older sister who taught me about astrology and astral projection and, all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, cool. That's I'm the oldest, so I had to kind of
Oh,
figure it out on my own. But yeah, it's kind of nice to have that, eh?
yeah, yeah, I was the youngest, so I got fed all of the information, both good and bad.
Right. So let's go back to, I guess, when was that you would have been introduced into astrology? In your early 20s, maybe?
Let's see, I'm 41 now, and it was about 22 years ago.
So
So
18,
yeah,
17. Cool.
yeah. I mean, I knew about astrology before that, but I didn't start to study it seriously until I guess I was in my 20s. Back then, of course, there were no astrology teachers or schools available to
Mhm.
me where I was. So I just read books, but also I started to read charts. I
Right.
mean, you can read endless books about astrology, but you're not really going to take a lot of it in. You have to practice it. Look up your family's charts, your kids, ex-partners, and even famous people. You can look at their charts, and that's really the best way that you learn. So I guess it was like a blood memory for me because it felt familiar. A lot of the stuff that I worked out about astrology, I kind of figured it out. It came to me. It was a knowing. And that's really how I've managed to rescue my own practice of astrology from the New Age.
Right. And so how long was it from then, say your early 20s, and you're doing new age stuff until you got into sort of your ancestral path?
Let's see, I kind of didn't really become a full-on heathen or follower of Austria until about 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So not that long ago, but I think that I've grown a lot since then and really unlocked a lot of the ancestral wisdom that was kind of obscured by New Age stuff.
And you mentioned that you were in the OTO before. When would that have been in that process?
That was a quite a long time ago. I think that was about 2007 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was quite interesting. I've always kind of read a lot of Aleister Crowley, and I was in the OTO, but it was really more of a social thing for me.
Right.
I didn't like the fact that nearly all of the members seemed to be quite extreme leftists.
Right.
That didn't really make any sense to me, considering that Aleister Crowley was such a rebellious figure. And of course, he did work with the Egyptian gods, which were Indo-European. So I got a lot out of it. But it wasn't really for me. It was just something was missing. There were a lot of fucked up people in the OTO, as you tend to get in those type of magical organizations. So when I found out Citriad, like everything sort of fell into place. I had done a lot of other magic over the years, a lot of really dumb things.
Yeah.
When you don't have a fear of death, then hey, why not? Let's just kind of summon this demon with a sigil anointed with my own blood. just
Right.
for the hell of it. So I
Mm-hmm.
probably should be dead by now, but managed to kind of be okay. But a lot of crazy stuff happened during those times of my life. It doesn't have to be such a hard road.
Mm-hmm.
You can gain knowledge and enlightenment without having to go through absolute hell, which is what those kind of practices will bring to your doorstep.
Yeah, I agree. But that's the process of learning that you had to go through. And hopefully we can make it easier on others,
Yes.
going through their process. That's kind of like, some people are like the testing the ground, right? And seeing what works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've just always been interested in different cults and stuff like that from
Mm-hmm.
sort of a research standpoint, but not from a like an operative magical standpoint, really. I've always been
Yeah.
a little weary of that stuff, I must say. I've had a lot of entity issues in my life too, so starting
Yes.
at a really
Yes.
early age and stuff like that. So
Also me. Yeah. I had a lot of stuff that happened in my childhood, waking up and seeing like hooded figures at the end of my bed, which I believe is quite common. A lot of people have experienced that. But then always that sense of, something's not quite right. And feeling under spiritual attack, and sleep paralysis, and all of that.
mm-hmm.
But as soon as I found Austria and I started to do rituals with Odin and Thor. It's not really enough to just believe or resonate with. You have to practice. So you have to align yourself with them by doing rituals and making offerings to them. Nothing dares attack me now. Nothing will come near me. And I don't say that by like meaning that, I'm really powerful or anything. It's just that I am under their protection. And a lot of these entities, they shouldn't even be in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Like the jinn, for example, that's a Middle Eastern thing, but they're everywhere. So they're nasty little fuckers, and they
Mm-hmm.
cause stuff like drug addictions, sexual issues. They feed off sexual energy, and they do stuff to make people question their gender and sexuality.
Yeah, like I kind of feel like a lot of that stuff was brought over around the times of like the Crusades and things like that, right? Bringing back these artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
And like the Templars were into like Mithraism and stuff like that, which I guess is partially Indo-European, but they were bringing stuff back from that world that I think a lot of it,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the trouble started too.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a lot of entities around us now that really shouldn't be there. And your only protection from that is going to be your ancestral gods. So salt and all of that only does so much. Smudging, salt, they laugh at it.
So that's actually because I was listening to your Patreon show you did the other day, and that's something that I was actually going to bring up with you, because I think why, like, so yeah, you're saying like clear the air. Like I always do a smudge before I do a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like just clear the air or whatever, but it's like the only reason that would work at all is because it's kind of like grounding you a little bit, which is
Yeah.
gonna help you with like entities and all that type of stuff. But yeah, it's not gonna be like exorcising demons or anything like that, right?
No.
But it's like it's
No.
gonna help you because it's grounding you a little bit, and so that's gonna just
Yes.
help you become more in your spiritual center and whatnot. But yeah,
Yeah.
so
I
I don't
mean,
think it's like a
smudging is
Ghostbuster thing.
no. Smudging is good when you've had an argument with your partner,
Yeah,
or someone that you really don't like comes to visit you.
yeah.
Right? It's a good way to kind of gently clear energy away. But if you have an actual problem with an entity, and another thing that New Age has done is to kind of to gaslight people into thinking that there are no negative spirits.
Right. It's all good angelic guides and whatnot, right?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
completely ridiculous. And then they have to go and find people like me to help them. But yet they would say that I'm kind of some kind of low energy or demonic myself because I work with Odin and Thor. But if you're dealing with an entity, you have to go to a bigger entity for help. It's like when your kid is bullied A kid is bullied in the schoolyard. What are they going to do? Go to your bigger brother. The gods are the most powerful. So that would be the first thing that I do, but also your symbols. The symbols that they're trying to say are racist and banned, they are also effective. But stuff like salt and smoke, your own energy is actually the most powerful. So I use the runes. So it doesn't have to be anything super complicated. If you energetically draw a rune in the air and visualize it maybe being like the color blue, that will protect you from anything.
Yeah, so there's this guy, Jerry Marzinski, and he's worked in like mental institutions and stuff like that. And like, you know, and one thing he says, like crystal meth people, they're like possessed like right off the bat. That's why they become schizophrenic. But he was like finding that these people's alternate, like the voices that were like talking in these people's heads were all like in unison. Like all the voices of all his patients would be like saying things to him. And they said, yeah, they don't like sage, they don't like salt baths, but they just don't like it. It's not like, oh, this amazing thing that's going to cure them. And it was pretty interesting. A lot of the techniques Jerry Marzinski employed, like one of them was like imagining that this voice in your head's mouth was full of cotton balls. And so what he was doing was getting the patients to use their own energy to stuff out these voices and these things, right? And I think that's what a lot of this, like those rituals do, is like you're setting your intentions, right? You're setting these intentions, it's like you're making a stand, right? And then that is going to like fortify your energy. And then when you're dealing with your ancestry and your ancestral gods, it's just all the more powerful. But a lot of it is like setting these boundaries. And look at what people, no borders, no boundaries.
Yep.
There's no good or bad. It's just your thinking that makes it that way, right? All this shit that people have been taught. It's like, you know, self-defense is violence, all this type of stuff.
Yeah.
No wonder we're dealing with so many problems.
It's complete madness.
Yeah.
Complete madness, especially the New Age. Like, ask Archangel Michael for protection or visualize white light. That doesn't do anything other than piss them off and make you more of a target. So if you want to use your own energy to protect you, the reason why you're getting issues with entities and spirits or even people is because your own energy is weak. Right? So the energy field is real. You know, that's not a New Age thing. If you visualize your entire body and your energy that extends slightly beyond that, being covered in some kind of very hard substance. So it could be stone, it could be wood, it could have spikes coming off it or thorns. Nothing is going to come near you. So shamans used to use energetic weapons. They would create a dart or some kind of weapon with their own energy. If you visualize it, it becomes real. So if you turn your body into an energetic weapon, nothing is going to harm you. But the problem is that people are not being taught these techniques.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like the energy work, like even like something like Qigong, or they have like frequency healing, like tuning forks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, but the Qigong and the way that it works is you're doing a lot of this visualizing this energy, right? And it's like, it's not like, oh, think of white light for 30 seconds and you're all good. It's like a long process of slowly building up this energy from within you, right? Yeah. There's a lot of holes in people's auras and stuff like that. I listened to Chance Garton, who does a lot of sound healing stuff. And it's pretty interesting. He uses like dowsing rods to find like the people's auras and then like doing frequency healing. It's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah,
we know it's all true because like there's guys like Bruce Lipton and other people have been talking about this for years, like PhD biologists, and you know, hey, where are they at? New Age is running rampant. Where are you guys at?
I know it's very sad. The other thing that will contribute to these attacks is a lot of unresolved trauma. So if you were massively disempowered as a child, or like I was, you were under a physical threat every day. Of course, you may feel like when you're an adult that is still within you. You still feel, for a long time, I was scared to be in the house by myself, or I would start to get really agitated at nighttime. And this went on into my, early 20s and stuff. And of course, what that did was actually I got attacked both from the spirit world, but also my house got broken into and stuff. And we didn't have a lot of crime back at that time because the paramilitaries were in control. Now the police don't do anything, but it's not victim blaming, but I was seeing myself as something that was weak.
Mm-hmm.
So if the spirit world will have a go, if you don't feel empowered, but then as you feel stronger within yourself and you make sense of your past and your wounds, you're not fearful. And when those fears started to drop, I didn't have any more of that stuff.
Yeah, you know what's funny is like I never liked being in the house alone at night either.
Okay.
Even like if like my wife leaves or whatever, like then my house is so quiet, and it's like, but then when I started doing these rituals, now there's like no fear of anything. I'm not hearing weird noises or whatever, right? It's kind of it's pretty neat. But yeah, it's like martial arts. You practice martial arts, you will probably never get in a fight again, just because you've been practicing that martial arts, and it's just like you give off this vibe, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting.
It's
Like
true.
bullies pick on weak people and people who look weak. If someone
It's
stands
true.
up to a bully, that's it. They're done. They're not going to keep picking on that person, no matter how big they are or small they are, right?
Yeah. It's very, very true. Yeah. And when you start to work with the gods, for example, let's say you start to work with Thor. And when I say work with, I mean do a ritual with him. I do a ritual with Thor every month, the first Thursday of every month. And you start to feel more like Thor within yourself, because these are our blood ancestors. So you start to have that strength. Thor isn't scared of being in the house by himself,
Yeah.
Or he's not scared of giants or serpents or any of that stuff. So you start to become fearless.
And you know what's interesting? It's like not just that, you're tapping into the way your ancestors felt.
Yes.
And how they were fearless and how they had that courage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had that independence. So it's like you're doing that because you're doing these similar rituals to your ancestors. You're also tapping into the way they felt. They're hopping on boats and going off to unknown places. They weren't afraid of that.
I know. And that's such a good point. Yeah. And it's so sad because that is why they had to invent Christianity so that they would become fearful. Most importantly, fearful of dying. Because when someone is afraid of death, you can control every aspect of their life.
Yeah.
And that's what they had to do to remove. They had to invent this figure and unleashed it like a cancer over the world. And the thing is that there was no peaceful conversion. That's a total lie. They used to put people into snake pits, make them swallow snakes. Sometimes they slaughtered entire villages of people that refused to convert. Those were our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
So of course they knew that over a couple of generations, the people would mentally forget that had happened, but your body would still hold that trauma. So that it was such a good war weapon for them to use.
Well,
but the thing is,
sorry, continue.
No, I was just going to say that we are where we are now because of that.
Well, it's like your religious symbolism, anything like that, your religious practices. To do any of those, you would be afraid, right?
Yeah.
To even have a symbol, you'd be afraid because of that. It's going to ignite that trauma again, right? And yeah, it's crazy, man. And that's why like with the native people here or whatever, we have a lot in common, because the same thing that happened to them happened to our ancestors just 500 years previous, 1,000 years previous. And so there's a lot of this similar, the trauma is fresher for them,
Yeah. Very sad, but people are rediscovering that they could never get rid of the old gods. Not really. And people are starting to find that path again when they realize that the new age is fucked up and just as bad as the Abrahamism. Atheism doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There is something there that will make you feel more whole and get away from all of drop the traumas and become stronger and more fearless.
It's like breaking things into a bunch of little parts rather than having it be a stronger whole, right? And that's what they're doing with every one of us. Like you say, the fear of death, like look what's been happening in the past 2 years. Everyone's afraid of death over this thing that's not even going to kill you.
I know.
It's like I personally have a 0% chance of dying from this virus. And again, 99.89 whatever percent of people also do. It's insane, but because of the fear of death is so strong, like more people slip and fall in the shower and die. But it's like they're so afraid to even leave your house, hug your grandkids. It's like, whoa, buddy.
Yeah.
Like it's the fear of death is the problem. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
People weren't as afraid of death, we would have so many less problems in the world.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Because courage, all that stuff.
Yeah. Because they were taught, well, when Christianity took hold, it's like, well, of course you're going to fear death. This kind of like maniac on a cloud could cast you into the fiery pits of hell, which of course hell was a realm in the 9 worlds, and it was a goddess that rules over there. It's a place of peace, but they didn't even change the word, really. So
added an L.
Yeah.
Completely
evil. And even if the kind of Abrahamism afterlife doesn't even exist, so even if you don't believe in that, you're going to the 9 worlds. So those are the real realms of the afterlife, and part of you is going to reincarnate as one of your ancestors.
Totally. So you are one of these more realistic astrologers out there. You tell people how it is. There's that Saturn Jupiter conjunction in Pisces, which you're like the one who's like, it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
But everyone else says it's going to be this blissful, kumbaya moment. And are we in Neptune retrograde right now?
Yes, we are.
We are. So it's like now people are seeing things more clearly, seeing things how it is. Like I think that's why people are getting so like stressed out and bummed out. Everyone's like, oh my God, like this is the worst time of the whole pandemic. It's like right now, and it's like we're out of the woods, folks. Come on now. So I think it's like this. People are actually seeing, oh wow, all our systems are fucked up. Education systems are fucked up. Our religions are fucked up. So it's kind of nice to have that's why astrology is very objective, right? But people try and put this like positive spin on everything, and it's not all going to be positive.
No, and I think that to be an astrologer, you should also be familiar with the cycles of the yugas. So when we're in the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, nothing is going to improve, but you have to just wait it out, because it's like winter, everything is being cleared, and people are like the light is very dim. There is no light. So we have to take that into perspective when we're analyzing the cycles of the planets. And there is some quite disturbing astrology coming up. Like in 2024, Uranus is going to conjunct Algol. Right. Now, I predicted the start of the war between Russia and Ukraine to the day, because I knew that the North Node was going to conjunct Algol, which is a fixed star, and it's said to be the head of the demon. And it represents wars and diseases and everything that's kind of hideous. So when Uranus conjuncts that in 2024, we're going to be in for a bit of a ride.
Right.
Uranus.
I was going to say, is there like a whole Uranus Pluto square happening again too, right? Or something? What's going on there?
Pluto is actually going into Aquarius, so it will start a square. Now, I definitely connect, not to be fearful or negative, but let's be realistic. So I have to be realistic, and I will only say what I believe to be true. I'm not going to candy coat it. But Pluto in Aquarius is very much like nuclear weapons. Aquarius and Uranus are connected to nuclear weapons.
Right.
Because it's advanced technologies. And there could be all kinds of stuff happening over the next couple of years. So I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, everything's going to be okay. Just stay where you are, look at your computer. Don't worry, someone else is going to fix it. No, move away from the city, go and find a piece of land somewhere and get some freaking seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Store your books, because part of Pluto and Aquarius means that they will definitely be limiting a lot of stuff online.
Right.
So they wanted us to move to ebooks, so then they can all be mass deleted, and a lot of knowledge is lost. So buy your books, buy the ones that they don't want you to read.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have a whole library downstairs because about 15 years ago or more, I could see this happening, and I was like, I got to buy every book that I ever want to read. And I've been slowly just I'm buying so many books, and it's like, you can't even get around to reading them all, but I'm thinking about when I'm like 50 years old, I'm going to want to read some of these books, right? Like, and my kids will want to have some of these books. So
yeah, good job.
One thing about, Pluto, when it went into Capricorn, I felt that was like really positive. It was like breaking down all these systems. It was like when Pluto was in Sagittarius, it was like Obama, and it was like we are change and hope and blah, and all this crap. And then about like 2 weeks later, it went into Capricorn, and we're like, this guy's a shill, what a joke. And everyone started realizing, and that system started breaking down. So like one positive thing I see about Pluto going into Aquarius is like maybe all this collectivism, we're going to see all these issues with this collectivism. And I'm, it's like we're going in there, boom, we had that Jupiter Saturn conjunction there.
Yeah.
I think is like a lot of sort of like, if there's a bit of a theme, an underlying theme of that'll be going on for, I guess, the next 20 years.
Yeah, but, I think so.
I think a little Pluto and Aquarius will be kind of good for people, maybe, I don't know.
Like all astrology transits, it will have some really good stuff and it will have some really bad stuff. That's just the nature of life. The planets reflect us. They don't cause anything. Yeah. They reflect our decisions on Earth and the stuff that's going on Earth. So we don't have this, something is not just good or bad. There are many different layers. There are many different colors that are going on. So yeah, of course, there will be some excellent stuff. People going into their tribes, connecting to their like tribal group, seeing that everything around us has been a fucking puppet show for many years now, and moving away from that entirely.
And like these groups like the UN and UNICEF and all these like organizations and groups, I think people will start seeing maybe like, hey, these aren't the greatest things. The EU, the UN, all that shit is just crap, really. Yeah. I think a lot of people are coming to that realization now about all of those groups. And so with this, like, so I always think about like the collective versus like this personal level. Like the Jupiter Neptune conjunction in my chart was really good, but people thought it was going to be good like for the collective, and I find like the collective always takes like the shadow aspects of things, it's like it's always going to be like what would be the shadow version of that, and that's what the collective meets out. It's like delusion, escapism, more fake stuff. It's not like spiritual connection and enlightenment. For me, it was in my 10th house and I had a lot of good stuff, but when you look at it on a collective level, it's gonna, the masses, the unconscious masses will always act unconsciously, basically.
That's very true. Yeah, and that Jupiter Neptune conjunction, people were as usual saying that I was being too negative, and apparently I was like one of the only astrologers to say that, well, hang on, this isn't really going to be very good. There's going to be a lot of illusions, deception, stuff about viruses, which Neptune is connected to, and like a very strong drain on people's energy. And people were exhausted during that time, myself included. So I had some good things happen spiritually in my spiritual life. But of course, the average person is not concerned with that. They're very much playing out the negative aspects of Pisces and Neptune, which is being glued to the Kardashians, eating fake food, and pretty much living a completely unnatural existence.
Yeah, totally. Delusion.
Yeah.
Mass delusion.
Yeah.
2025. What do you got there? You got anything that sticks out? We got 2024. Not going to be that great either. 2025.
I actually can't remember.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I can't remember a lot of things. I need to, I can't, my head, they don't stay in my head. So
No.
I didn't have anything prepared, but
No,
I did do a podcast with Freeman Fly.
Right. Yeah, I did catch that actually.
A couple of months ago, and I went over the astrology of the next couple of years entirely with him, but I don't have those dates with me today. So if people want to listen to that, they can just go to my YouTube channel and it's on there. But I know that Uranus is going to enter Gemini around that time, which is going to be pretty significant.
Right.
The last time that Uranus was in Gemini was around the Second World War. So big changes in terms of communication and information around that time. Also stuff to do with boundaries and borders of countries. So we'll see what happens. But the next couple of years going into 2025 and 2026, they look very extreme. And we live in an extreme time where there doesn't seem to be any middle ground about anything anymore. You have to be this or that. You cannot be something different. Right. You have to be, you're vegan or carnivore, right, or you're atheist, or you're pagan, or you're pro-vax, you're anti-vax. There's no moderation anymore. Yeah. Everything is extreme.
Yeah, it's like a simpleton kind of a level, right? Because the more knowledge you have and the more wisdom you have, things are very nuanced, right? It's not like everything is just black and white, and it's totally wild, eh? Like how it's just like, oh, this is bad, this is good. It's like, well, it's like there's different circumstances that happen in the world where certain things might come about, and it's like the options have been so limited and shrunk down,
I know. We live in a kind of parallel society where some of us are on one dimension and the others are on another one. And it's like you don't meet in the middle anymore.
Yeah. What do you got there?
Sorry, my cat just came in through the door there.
That's what I thought. You're like, stay back, cat. Cool. Well, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
So my website is www.fionaedgar.com. And you can also find me on Patreon, patreon.com/FionaAedgar. And I'm also on Telegram. I do daily astrology voice clips on my Telegram channel. I can't remember the link. So if you just search for Fiona Aedgar, it will come up.
Cool. I'll put the links in the show description here.
Yeah.
I think we can probably end it here pretty soon. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything
Not
you want to
really.
get off your chest?
No, we can probably come back on and do the astrology over the next couple of years another time.
Yeah, cool.
If you would like. So I remembered that there was like the daddy of all eclipses for North America. I'm pretty sure that was 2024.
Right.
I was looking at that the other day and thinking, wow, what is going to happen? Of course, that's the next election time for America, isn't it? Yes.
I think so. And South Node in Virgo. I remember you mentioned something about that as well in 2025. So
yes,
I wrote South Node in Virgo, the needlecraft kicks in. That was one of my
oh wow.
One of my
notes. My goodness. So that's when the Walking Dead TV show starts to become a reality.
Yeah, that's right. If it hasn't already.
They were prepping us for that time, I think, with all of those zombie shows.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's wild, and all the post-apocalyptic stuff was really just about our past.
Yeah, I know. But like we said earlier, it's already happened before, so it will happen again. We have to just take it on the chin and realize that it's a natural cycle of an unnatural existence that we have to just get through.
You got to keep your head up and your chin held high, and
Yeah.
don't take no guff from these swine.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like
Yeah.
you say, like even though we're in this age, it's, you know, like I can go in my backyard with my kids and play and talk with my neighbors, and you know,
Yeah.
there's joy, and there's still life goes on, right? That's what they
If
say. Life goes on.
it does, and if you're glued to this stuff 24/7, you're going to be miserable all the
Yeah.
time.
I don't even know what's happening in the world. People kind of just tell me because, you know, again,
Me
I was like,
too.
I was predicting a lot of the stuff. My wife was like, how are you predicting all this stuff over the past 2 years? And it's like, because I know their game plan. Like, if you know you're going to box someone and you know what their boxing style is, you know, basically what they're going to try and do, you know, like this guy fights at a length, this guy fights at in close, you know, and it's like, I remember she was on Facebook and I was like telling her, I was like, this is what's going to happen, love. I was like, Joe Biden's going to win the election, and then the environmental stuff will come back. And I'd said something else too, and she went on her Facebook and she's like, you have to come look at these posts. And I was like, I don't want to see it, I hate the news and blah blah blah. She's like, no, come here. And it was like, the first post was Biden wins, and then underneath it was, now Greta is back. Like, how you predict? I was like, Biden, then the environment. But it's like, if you're paying attention, you know your enemy's tactics, right? Like,
Yes.
you know, you have their portrait on your desk, as like Michael Tsarian always says, right? You want to know your enemy, then you're not going to be surprised by what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
You know, a drug dealer tries to sell drugs. You're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be surprised when he tries to sell you drugs like this. People have to start getting a little more realistic, I think.
I know.
And,
I know. Yeah. And
yeah.
behind it all, it's the Bolsheviks. They never went away.
No.
And I think it wasn't it Yuri Bezmenov, and he commented that they would infiltrate every university, every government, and every position of power and authority, and all of the corporations all around the world. And I think that they have achieved that, and that's what we have to face, is that there actually is no Messiah coming, not yet. You know, the Vedas have been right about everything. And they say that there is this like God called Kalki, and he comes in human form. And of course, it could be one person or it could be a whole movement of people.
Right.
And he said to just come to kill, to bring complete destruction to the world, because it's become so, it's moved so far away from nature. And it's just an existence of endless suffering for, never mind the humans, what about the animal kingdom? Look what they have to go through every day. And
well, we're all connected, right? We're all connected to this morphogenetic field. So like, you know, the suffering of one is literally the suffering of all. And but that's the one part that the New Age movement has got a little bit going on, but they just do a bunch of stupid shit around it, right?
I know. Well, when I was a teenager, lefties loved animals, and they didn't want animals to suffer through vivisection and horrific experiments on them for stupid drugs. But now they all seem to have forgotten about that, and they're all pro, like, oh, I need these drugs for my autism, and they don't care about the bunnies anymore. But if you eat meat, no, that's the worst. But what about your psych meds that were tested on beagles and cats?
Or your fucking shampoo.
Exactly.
You know, it's like everything. It's like, come on, people. But yeah.
Hypocrisy.
They've
at its
conveniently
finest.
forgot about that, right? Yeah, it's the hypocrisy. It's wild.
Yeah.
Wild. Well, I'm so glad you came on. I think this was a good conversation. It kind of went all over the place.
Yeah, it was good. Very good.
Yeah.
I'll definitely come back because I really enjoyed it. Look, thank you.
Yeah, it's fun. We can talk about astrology more next time or something, eh?
Yeah. Let's do the astrology over the next several years, and I'll be more prepared. I have a Gemini stellium, so I cannot remember dates for things at all. So I'm a bit scattered sometimes, but we'll get that ready and we can talk about that.
Yeah, cool. We'll do a little prepping and see how it goes, eh?
Sure.
Yeah. And just everybody keep your head up out there and find your ancestral path, because that's the most powerful thing you can do.
It is.
I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, I hope everyone enjoys, and check out Fiona Aedgar, fionaedgar.com, Fiona Aedgar YouTube. I'll put all the links below in our show notes.
Thanks.
Okay. See you, everybody.
Bye.